Welcome to Agronomy Moment. I'm your host, Wendell Cohen. We bring in people who agree with me, disagree with me, and above all, are not afraid to say it like it is. Hey, good day. Welcome back to Agronomy Moment, everyone. We have a special guest today on our podcast, the owner and founder of Carbon Works, George Sims. Mr. Sims is an Auburn graduate and a former Navy jet pilot. Thank you for your service. And also a Florida farmer with 40 years of experience. Carbon Works is a family-owned company specializing in advanced carbon-based soil and nutrient enhancers. And this company was born out of necessity, because Mr. Sims faced saltwater intrusion into his irrigation wells and discovered that existing humic products were often unstable, had low quality, or were biologically inactive. And yet he felt that the carbon was a key part of helping out his soil again. And so anyway, we're going to talk about that today. Welcome here, Mr. Sims.
Hey, thank you, Wendell. I'm very excited to be a part of your podcast, and thank you for allowing me to share what I've been learning for the last 21 years.
You bet. George, just how would you illustrate here in a few words the work of carbon in the soil and how it plays a part in how it affects nutrients, or how nutrients are affected by soil health?
Well, that's a great start, Wendell. My first 20 years of farming in Florida, where we have a very low organic matter, less than 1%, way less, and we also have a very low CEC holding capacity. So in beach sand, of which Florida is, we're in essence a peninsula sticking out into saltwater. And so it was challenging at the start because our soil is not very rich in the ability to have carbon, which is the food source for biologicals, whether it's native, whether it's there as organic matter, or where it is added later as compost or manure, other sources of carbon. And then what we're talking about today is taking a humic-based product, which is pure carbon, but then doing things to it to enhance it. And so I saw the benefit of where, as you mentioned, saltwater intrusion into our agriculture wells started happening 30 and 40 years ago. Now, all agricultural wells in Florida, which are 1,500 foot deep, are in essence saltwater. And so nothing very much grows well in saltwater. And that's why I looked at a way to adapt my agronomy program by utilizing carbon, which is in essence one of the three ingredients needed to build sugar. You know, photosynthetic sugar is built by plants by utilizing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So that's what Carbon Works has focused on, is to take a carbon base, which is kind of the truck, and I'm delivering energy, hydrogen, and molecular oxygen, which is attached to that carbon.
Okay. So how does this affect plant nutrition? What you talked about the truck, just talk about that a little more. This is what is helping to carry the nutrition and hold it?
Absolutely. The carbon is actually the glue in the soil, whether it's natural organic matter or whether it's things that are added. You need a carbon source because the biologicals actually consume carbon as their primary food source. They utilize nutrients and they need the nutrients, but they're in essence, the soil biologicals are converting the nutrients in the soil. If you look at cation exchange capacity, you know, we've been told by the fertilizer companies, well, for every 1 CEC, you can hold 10 units of nitrogen. Well, there's a lot more to CEC. Correct. The holding capacity is about the ability to hold those nutrients in the soil when you don't have organic matter and things like I am faced with beach sand in Florida. So by increasing the CEC, which is actually the cation exchange capacity, is the trading of a hydrogen ion at the root tip for a nutrient. because you've got a positive ion in the hydrogen, a +1, and it can draw in the nutrients into the root system and then be taken up with water so that the plant can utilize those nutrients, whether they're macro or micronutrients. You've got to have that exchange capacity. So one of the things that led me into this, Wendell, was that I looked at nature. Simply, how does nature work? Because no one fertilizes the forest, no one sprays the forest, but yet the forest thrives very well. Now, I'm smart enough to know that in the forest, we're not harvesting anything. Everything there is recycled. It is a homogeneous environment. But on our farms, we're trying to grow products that we're going to take away from the farm. So this is the challenge. How can we continue to invigorate our soil, but yet grow the crops we need, but replace the things that we're taking out? And that's why I chose carbon, which is the natural element that I saw as the consistency in the photosynthetic process. Now, one of the things, I'm sorry.
No, go. Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I focus on, Wendell, is not just the photosynthesis, it's also the importance of the respiration, because the soil biologicals are consuming up to 50% of the photosynthetic sugar. They have to eat too. They're workers in the soil, so we have to feed them. So if they don't naturally have that availability of a carbon source in the soil, they're going to consume more of our photosynthetic sugar, and then we have less to go into yield. So this becomes the challenge. Let's balance this equation, because the aerobic biologicals in the soil that are so important to making nutrients available and also in nitrogen conversion, that is needed, the carbon, but they also need oxygen. And that is part of the process in the photosynthesis. The byproduct of the sugar is also oxygen, so that the aerobic biologicals can then respirate that carbon. They're after the food. But oh, by the way, the end result of that respiration of that photosynthetic sugar by the soil biologicals, the end result is CO2 and water, which just happens to be two ingredients needed to make more sugar. And also, like it, Wendell, how often do we think about the stomata, the intake and exhale of a plant leaf? Where is it located? On the bottom of the leaf. Well, those soil biologicals in the top part of the soil, the aerobic biologicals, when they break down that sugar, they're releasing that CO2 right into the bottom of the leaf.
Sure. Okay, so now tell us, you talked a little bit about oxygen and how that plays a part, and that kind of leads into what you talked about in the past to me about that not all carbon's created equal. So tell us about the anaerobic carbon that doesn't contain molecular oxygen.
Well, thank you, Wendell. And I started this journey, Wendell, back in 2005, the carbon journey, I call it. I had farmed for 20 years the traditional way, using all best management practices, did everything that the universities and the farm agents told us to do, and we tried to follow the best practices, and we saw declining yields. And so I had to start looking for other answers. And that's when I started looking at the carbon as a missing link in my soil, which I knew with low organic matter. And I knew I had a very low CEC. Our CEC down here is a 5. Now, you know that that's very low as compared to what you experience in your part of the world in the Midwest, where I've been working since 2019 now. So I've got 17 years in the Midwest on corn and soybeans. So I like to get that in view, because I want guys to understand that I'm not a newbie to the Midwest. I do and have spent a lot of time learning about corn and soybeans so that I can be helpful in your part of the world. But in that
now, just as a real quick side note here, for those who watch here and are acquainted with Nate Furley, George has worked closely with Nate Furley with Ag Revival, and Nate Furley has been a regional agronomy manager at Beck's, and then also has now taken on a product characterization research. And I've leaned on him a lot as well for knowledge, and George works closely with him. So sorry about the little side spur here, but continue on with the commenting on how I guess where I'm going with this carbon and lack of oxygen is, did you have experience with carbon that did not have oxygenated carbon first? And then like, how did that journey take place, and why was that important to find the right
Well,
carbon?
that's a very good topic to talk about, Wendell, because that is in essence exactly what happened. When I got introduced to the carbons, all humics are not created equal. Okay, they may come from the same source, being a soft coal, whether that's
Okay.
subbituminous coal, lignin, lignardite. It's called all kind of things, peat bog, and a lot of it comes out of Canada. There's very good sources in Canada, but it could
Yep.
come out of New Mexico, Utah. It could come from China, even. There's lots of places to get the raw humic powder. But in and of itself, the raw humate is, in essence, Wendell, useless, because if it has not been
Okay.
processed, okay, in a way that it could be activated, the raw coal, carbon, it's black and powdery, and it is carbon, but it is not biologically available. That is the challenge. So I spent 5 years from 2005 until 2010 learning all these things about carbon, in essence, because the thing that's challenging with the carbon world, Wendell, is that it doesn't fall under fertilizer regulations. It doesn't have its own regulations. It's basically the old Wild
Yep.
West. You know, people could go around and say anything they want about humic, and it's no way to validate it. And
Yep.
so I never got the same answer to a question that I asked in these early days when I was studying it, 20 years ago. I never got the same answer from people. So I kind of had to start doing my own research. Now, humec's been around for hundreds of years over in Europe, but it really didn't come into prominence in the US until right after World War II. So out in California, Idaho, Washington State, they use a lot of humic, and they've used it for a long time. But for us in the South and you in the Midwest, we'd never heard of such a thing. We didn't know what it was. I've had people joke with me and ask me, say, well, humic, is that a new element? What number's that? And I say, oh, it's still number
Yeah.
6. It's still carbon. But the humates are
Yep.
very, uh, I guess, it's hard to tell a layman without going through a lot of the science about the humates.
Okay.
But what you're looking for is you want pure carbon. You want it as pure as you can get it, because a lot of carbons out there that are sold, and they're sold by major international companies and they're sold by local people, those humate products typically wind up with a lot of excess material in the bottom of the container, whether it's the tote or a jug.
Yep.
And that are a lot of the minerals and salts that are naturally in that material that was dug up out of the earth. This, in essence, is a coal that hasn't been in the ground, whatever it is, millions of years longer to turn into anthracite coal. This coal won't burn. You got
Yep.
to have the hard coal to burn, but this soft coal does have a function and a use, but it's got to be activated. And that's one of the important things I tell everyone. If you have a raw humate that's never been activated, it'll fill up a hole on your farm, but it won't do anything else. University research says that that's not biologically available for 1 to 200 years. Well, I don't think any of us, Wendell, are buying things for our farm that we're going to have to wait for our great great
Yes.
grandchildren to be able to utilize it. So, what CarbonWorks was after, I wanted to find a carbon. I wanted to get the best source I could. And then I took it and invented a process to add energy and oxygen, because all other humates, even my base carbon, Wendell, is a pH of 9 and has a negative molecular oxygen. And so I have transformed that with CarbonWorks products into an ultra low pH, 1 to 2 pH, and a high molecular oxygen, like plus 280 to 330 on the molecular oxygen, where all other humates could be anywhere from a minus 80 to a minus 500 on the oxygen. So you ask, what
Okay.
is the significance of that, George? Why is a negative oxygen and why is a high pH not beneficial? Well, it's self-explanatory in a way, Wendell, because the aerobic biologicals need oxygen and they need energy to be able to eat that food and process that carbon. So this is where
Yes.
CarbonWorks decided to add the energy and oxygen, tie it to the carbon, and deliver it in one liquid that has very specific uses. But that's the difference, because these other humate products that are out there certainly may be a lot less expensive. But the old saying is, Wendell, you get what you pay for. There's no free ride, there never
Yes.
was. And so we have spent now 20 years and 17 of those in the Midwest, and working with like Beck's Hybrids PFR program, going through the practical farm research. And we're very pleased and happy that they allowed us to work with them, and we're continuing to work with them with our products. And now we're PFR proven with some of our products. So that
Yep.
says a lot. And of course, especially to even the non-Beck's people, but
Yes.
Beck's hybrids people, they get it when you say PFR proven.
Yes, absolutely. Now, as we think about this from a really high level, now let's not talk about specific products that you have, but let's talk about it as it relates to the end result of what the carbon that you have created, the activated, oxygenated carbon. How does this affect nitrogen sources? Like just a little bit of the life cycle here. Let's start it with, you're going to go out and you're going to apply either UAN or urea, and you're going to apply it, and now you're going to treat it with this carbon. Now, what happens when we put this into the soil as it goes through its life cycle to get to the plant?
Well, the big thing,
Talk, I guess, yeah, just tell us a little bit how that affects
okay,
us or affects our crop.
this is the challenge, Wendell. If you take a high pH negative oxygen carbon, humic source product, and put
Okay.
it with the nitrogen, it is going to tie up that nitrogen. Is going to try to balance itself. Nature will always try to balance itself. So these other humate
Yes.
products that are high pH, they're actually a base and they're negative oxygen, they are actually going to bind up the nitrogen. They're not as favorable for the soil biologicals.
Okay.
That's why CarbonWorks was very purposeful with our cetane product, which is the carbon stabilization of nitrogen. We're delivering the low pH, which actually helps convert the ammonia to get it to ammonium, because you've got to get the NH3 to NH4
Yep.
before the soil biologicals can convert it. Now, we all, in everyday farming, we tend to forget that our 28 or 32% is actually 50% urea. It's only 25%
Yes.
nitrate readily available, and it's 25% ammonium. But initially on
Yep.
the corn plant does not need the ammonium initially. It needs it later, and works really well later in the corn cycle. But the importance is that we've got 50% of that liquid or dry urea that's still got to be converted by soil biologicals, Wendell. There's no other way. That's the way it works on all leguminous
Yep.
plants. That's why our soybeans or alfalfa or clover, they all need that biological conversion. And that's where the soil biologicals, being the nitrosomonas and nitrobacter, they're converting that ammonium into nitrite by adding oxygen, NO2, and then
Hmm.
the nitrobacter is converting the nitrite into nitrate, NO3, plant available. So you've got where we
Yep.
are, we have to have that conversion of the nitrogen by the soil biologicals. So by having a carbon product that has excess energy and excess oxygen, it greatly enhances that biological conversion of the nitrogen in the soil. Therefore, we're making more nitrogen plant available, but we're holding all three forms of that nitrogen, ammonium, nitrite, and nitrate, with the carbon. That's what the value of the carbon is.
Okay. So we put this. Let's just take UAN, or does it matter, urea or
No,
UAN? We apply. We put this carbon product onto this nutrient. We apply it to the soil. Does it help with volatility?
absolutely.
Like, are we able to put it?
It totally stops the
Okay.
volatility. That's the secret of cetane, is that by being an ultra pure carbon, which has been ultra
Okay.
processed by another manufacturer, we don't actually bring the carbon in from Canada and process it. That's done by another company. We buy their product, which is a humic powder, and then we solutionize it with energized water so that we can then put it through our process and add the oxygen to it. But this carbon
Yep.
has sites on the carbon molecule window, and that's how we're able to hold that ammonia with the carbon and stop the volatilization. It's become our signature demonstration. I call it the smell test. We take a bottle of UAN and we actually let the grower smell ammonia.
Yep.
We put in a microscopic amount of our cetane carbon in it, and you cannot smell the ammonia anymore. And that is why we prove, and this also is corresponds to another area, Wendell, that we work a lot in the Midwest, and that's manure. With hog manure, especially, and over in Nebraska with corn manure, dairy manure from cows,
Yep.
we wind up that it's the same principle because the manure is anaerobic. And by adding oxygen and energy, you invigorate the aerobic biologicals, which actually break down nutrients faster. But the other part of this, Wendell, is that by adding the oxygen, think about one of the problems that we have in our soil when we add nitrogen. We have denitrification, which is an anaerobic process. Well, anaerobics don't live in
Yes.
oxygen, Wendell. So when you add a product like cetane that's loaded with oxygen, you're actually slowing down that denitrification that's coming from the anaerobics.
Okay. And so that's taking place, saturated soils, situations like that, especially. And then as this carbon is molecularly bound, am I correct in that? It's bound to the
Correct.
nitrogen,
When you put the
and
carbon
it's so
in
it's
the
following it
nitrogen,
through the
you're
soil to the
binding the
root.
nitrogen to the carbon.
Yep. And then it's following it all the way to the root system. The plant takes it up as it's converting, and it's able to follow it through its life
Well,
cycle.
yes, and
Am
that's the
I
good news is that as the biologicals eat the carbon, they make the nitrogen then plant available. So
got
we
it?
don't have as much
And
leaching.
then yep. And right, it's holding on, it's the
Yes, sir.
glue holding it to the site. And then as it's taken by the plant, what happens in the plant? Is the carbon have any value to it at that point, or
Well, how does the plant build sugar, Wendell? Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So if you're supplementing all
okay?
three of those macro elements, that's something that I did not know in my first 20 years, Wendell, that I was told by, of course, my fertilizer and chemical companies that the big three were N, P, and K, and all the rest were micronutrients, when
Yep.
actually there's a book that I found in California 20 years ago, the Western Fertilizer Handbook. It's been in publication, Wendell, since 1952. I mean, this is a long time. This book has
Okay.
been in print, and it says in that book that the big three are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but Mother Nature takes care of that. Now, I agree with that in the
Sure.
native forest, Wendell, that Mother Nature does take care of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in the forest because no one is, messing with it. But on our farm, it's a
Correct.
totally different situation. But if we looked at just simply, Wendell, if you took the dry matter of any plant to Midwest Labs and you actually had it analyzed, the dry tissue is
Yep.
going to be 3 to 6% nitrogen, a half to 1% phos, and 1 to 3% potash. So if we had 6, 1, and 3, the highest of those numbers, Wendell, that's only 10% of
Yep.
a plant. The plant's mostly sugar water, like our own bodies. And so we've concentrated in my lifetime of farming since World War II, we've concentrated on N, P, and K, and we've overdone it. The
Sure.
reality is, if you don't have
Yep.
a balance of the other nutrients, which carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are, along with micronutrients, and then water and sunlight and all these other things, Wendell, it's about the total balance. And that's what Carbon Works is about.
Yep.
We invented a product that is balanced, that has very specific uses in our agronomy system, and we're just another tool. We're not replacing the toolbox, and I'm not ever saying that you can farm without the other nutrients. We need NP and K. We need
Correct.
other inputs, but it also has to be in the right balance.
Correct. Yep. That makes sense. And is there any benefit to using this with any other type of nutrients, like phosphorus, potassium, or is it just mostly a nitrogen assistance here?
Well, our product started out, Wendell, as you mentioned earlier, with Nate Furley and Ag Revival back in 2009 on he and his dad's farm in Fairfax, Minnesota.
Yep.
We started out with the product. My dark carbon was in furrow with water as a starter. And it was going up against the 1034Os and the 624.6s and nothing or water.
Yep.
And we were having a very positive response. We were actually helping invigorate the soil biology, Wendell, in cold, wet soil, because we all know you need technically to be to 55 degrees soil temp to have optimum corn seed germination. Well, how often does that really happen up in Minnesota in cold, wet ground? And then you go plant because you've been holed up all winter and the snow's finally melting enough that you can get out in the field and you can go plant, and then you'll still get another cold rain or snow on top of that. But it was always a problem with emergence. Well, by giving the soil biologicals in furrow, and I kind of deemed it the seed sphere, that little, like the size of a loggerhead marble around that seed. What I'm trying to do with CarbonWorks products is put it around that seed to enhance the germination of that seed, because at that point you need energy and oxygen, but you also need heat. You need the biologicals to be respirating that carbon along with germinating that seed to get that initial root development, but also to get those codling leaves to the surface, because in essence, a seed is a carbohydrate. It's the fuel tank. It's the gas tank. And we plant our seed based upon the size of the seed, the depth. So if we planted our corn seed at 12 inches like you do a potato seed, it would never come up. It'd never make it to the surface. We also don't want to plant them too shallow. But my point is that by adding carbon with energy and oxygen, I'm supplementing that initial germination of that seed, but also I'm enhancing the size of the fuel tank. But if we can get more even emergence and you and I have less skips in the field, we're going to get more yield. That's just common sense.
So would you be adding this carbon to like a starter fertilizer solution to enhance that, or would you be running it just by itself in the furrow?
We've done both, Wendell. It's basically the grower's option. If they need the FOS that's in the 1034O or the 624.6, even though it's low gallons, we're typically talking about 3 to 5 gallons in furrow because of the salt content. But the good news is if you put my carbon with it and you still want to use your starter fertilizer, my carbon will buffer the salts in that starter fertilizer. That's also going to help enhance germination.
Sure. Very, very good. That's very interesting. We are running out of time on this session, but I'm going to have you come back and we're going to do a part 2, and we're going to dive into the products next time about what you sell, the products you've been creating, doing the research on, and get a little more detail into that. But for this time, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Wendell. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you. See ya on the next one.
So, what? I thought it turned out well.
Yeah, I thought it was fine.
If you were Scott Dickey now, you would say something like, "It's about time for lunch."
Guys,
what else?
starving.
You're starving?
Yes.
What would he call it, Sid? What does he say? Grub or something. He calls it something else. He doesn't say, "Let's go for lunch." He says,
I don't know.
Ready for something. Call it.
Yeah, Scott, I don't.
You don't know what's going to come out.
Exactly.
But I wish he was here. We could have made a really nice roundtable discussion and
Hey, I got selected.
Field of Drums of the Year.
No. It's your turn again. For wave 1 of the whiskey.
It's almost bean time. So, I got spooners in my hand. I'm coming. It's almost bean time.
Lunch, yes.
Well, it's 11:30. It's 12 almost.
No, No, it's not.
Move where they're like I was shutting it off. And just
Yeah, I got that splinter dissected out.